coming up next on Your World.
We got out there to Orlando, Florida on the 12th. We flew out. And on the 15th, I found out a friend of mine got killed. I returned to New York. And when I got back, I went to the area where the murder happened. About maybe 5 police cars, detective cars, and everybody that just jumped out the car, and they took me to the precinct. They questioned me about this homicide, and I told them where I was at. I told them, I said I was in Orlando, Florida with my family on the 15th. When the murder happened, I told them, I said I have airplane tickets, hotel receipts, phone records, and videotape to show this.
To me would be a perfect alibi.
Perfect alibi.
And
alibi.
End of case.
Yes.
But that didn't happen that way, right?
No, it didn't.
Tell us about that.
And they came up with a verdict maybe about 6 o'clock that evening on Friday. They found me guilty, which I couldn't believe it.
Woo! Hello and welcome to Your World. Listen, I'm Creflo, and it's going to be an awesome time today. I want to talk to you about regret, about missed opportunities. Maybe you regret the time you didn't spend or words you didn't say to a loved one, and now it's too late. Maybe you did something that hurt someone or your actions have had lasting consequences. What would you give to go back and do it all over again? My guest today shares these regrets and more because he spent more than 2 decades behind prison bars, locked away and unable to guide his children away from the unending cycle of drugs and violence, unable to be there to nurture his relationship with his wife, and unable to enjoy the last years of his mother's life. And all of this for a crime he didn't commit. Wrongly imprisoned, my guest spent over 24 years in prison, years he will never get back. That's 24 years of family time, 24 years of freedom, 24 years lost with no way to recapture that lost time, 24 years of regret. We're going to talk to him right now, right here on Your World.
Changing one life, time after time. Oh Lord, we do it all for you.
Through the trials I see, I'll always believe a new life starts with me. Oh,
Change your world today. Change is gonna come your way. Change and get an understanding. His grace will transform you.
Welcome back. Now, my guest today is Jonathan Fleming. Back in 1989, Jonathan took his wife, his 2 sons, and his godson on a family vacation to Orlando, Florida, to visit Walt Disney World. Now, little did he know that upon his return, he would be falsely accused of murder. But here's the problem. The murder took place in Brooklyn, New York, while Jonathan was in Orlando with his family. Jonathan's here with us today to talk about how, despite a rock-solid alibi, he landed in prison and stayed there for nearly a quarter of a century, and why he now believes that God used prison as a way to save his life. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome today Jonathan Fleming to Your World. Welcome, sir. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Could you tell us what life was like for you before the conviction?
I've been in a lot of trouble as a young kid coming up in the projects in Brooklyn, New York. And I got involved in drugs. Came up doing crime after crime, and I have got in trouble. I lived on the dark side at that time. And it's not something that I'm proud of. I didn't really have to do that because I was the only child. And my mother, she always did whatever she had to do to help me out, to get me through, and even her sisters and them did. But I seen how my mother was, came up. She came up cleaning house, and she only could do but so much for me. She came up cleaning other people's house. And I got into the streets real early.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I wanted to, help my mother because I didn't like the idea that she was cleaning people's house. I used to go with her. I remember as early as maybe 10 years old, I used to go with my mother, and she used to clean people's house.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I got into the streets, when I did get into the streets, I started making money. So that was one of the reasons. And there was a lot of peer pressure as well. Guys that I was running the streets with, they was doing crimes, and I was right along with them, wanting to be down, wanting to be the guy in the neighborhood. So that's how it all started.
Were you sent to prison then, or youth
Yes.
detention?
The first time I got arrested, I was in high school. I was about 17 years old. I'll never forget, I had robbed a guy for a gold chain, and got arrested, and they gave me probation. But that was like a slap on the wrist, and I continued. When I got about 18 years old, I got caught with a gun in a car. They gave me a year for that. Then maybe when I was about, I would say maybe 21, I was about 21, I got locked up for a robbery. It was like in 1983. And when I came home, the crack epidemic era was in the community. Everybody was selling crack. Me living in the projects. It was fast money, more money than I ever seen in my life. And the opportunity was presented to me. Somebody gave me a package. They told me, listen, the crack is out. I'm willing to give you a package. And this is what I'm gonna give you, and you give me so much back. And that's how I got involved in the crack game.
Let's talk about just that whole situation, because I've really got some questions here. You go on vacation, and you come back, and 2 days later, you're accused. Take us through that journey there.
We got out there to Orlando, Florida on the 12th. We flew out. And on the 15th, I found out a friend of mine got killed. He was someone that actually used to work for me. He was a friend of mine. My mother knew his mother, me and him was good friends. I found out on the 15th he got killed. And what happened was I made a phone call to Brooklyn, and they told me, they said, yo, your friend Black got killed last night. And I said, what happened? They said, I don't know. All I know, I heard that he got killed. The 16th of August, 1989, I returned to New York. And when I got back, I went to the area where the murder happened, to with the projects where the drugs was at. And I seen my cousin and some of the other guys that was, that I hang out with, and we was on the corner, just standing on the corner, about maybe 5 police cars, detective cars, and everybody that just jumped out the car. It was me and about 5 other guys. They threw all of us on the floor, and they put handcuffs on me and told me to get up, and they said, yeah, we got you now. And they took me to the precinct. At this time, while I'm at the precinct, they questioned me about this homicide, about my friend being killed, Darryl Rush. We used to call him Black. And I told them where I was at. I told them, I said I was in Orlando, Florida with my family on the 15th when the murder happened. I told them, I said I have airplane tickets, hotel receipts, phone records, and videotape to show this.
To me, would be a perfect
Yes,
alibi.
perfect alibi.
And,
Perfect alibi.
End of case.
Yes.
But that didn't happen that way, right?
No, it didn't.
Tell us about that.
So when I got arrested, they arrested me for the crime that day. They had a witness. She was a crack user. She came, me not knowing, she had got arrested in a stolen van. She had outstanding warrants and she was on probation. So what happened was, I didn't know at the time, she made a deal with them. If she cooperate with this homicide, they won't arrest her for the stolen van. And they'll dismiss her warrants and all of that. But I didn't know at the time. So what happened was, when it was time to go to trial, I had this evidence, but before we could even go to trial, they gave me a Wade hearing. She had to actually come to the court, and she had to identify me in court. She came to the Wade hearing, and she identified me. She said it was me, that I did it. But what they also did, the district attorney's office, they went and got 2 more other witnesses to make it a strong case, because she's the actual eyewitness. She said that she see me do it, which was not the truth. But what they did, they went and got 2 other witnesses, which I would like to say both of these other witnesses is drug users.
So what was the reason for disregarding all of the eyewitness testimony that you were not even in town.
That's the part that I don't understand with the jury, because there's no way. There had to be some reasonable doubt. There had to be doubt. And I mean, during the deliberation, it was brought to our attention that they was having a problem with one of the jurors. Me and my lawyer thinking, oh, okay, one of the jurors is thinking that I'm guilty, and the rest is saying innocent, because everybody have to say, innocent. Come to find out, the one juror was the one who must be believed in my story, and they had to, I think he told them to go back in, try to, continue deliberating, come up with a verdict before the weekend come. Because if they didn't come up with a verdict that Friday, the jurors would have to wait. We'd have to wait till Monday. They would have to go to the hotel and everything. So he told them to go back in and keep continuing, keep trying to, come up with a verdict. And they came up with a verdict of maybe about 6 o'clock that evening on Friday. They found me guilty, which I couldn't believe it.
Tell us about life in prison for a moment. This is amazing. I mean, and I am trying to adjust my vision to the emotions of what you've already gone through. And now, 25 years, 7 months, and 20-something days of your life are getting ready to pass by for something that you didn't do. How was life in prison? How did you handle that every day, in and out, for those number of years, knowing that you didn't do it? How does a person do that?
I mean, I just took it one day at a time. I tried to stay out of trouble. I tried not to get into like the gangs. There's a lot of gang stuff going on. I stayed away from the gangs. I do a lot of reading. I used to stay in the law library working on my case. I would work out. Physically. I always try to keep my body in shape. But prison is really rough. I was assaulted in prison. I was assaulted by the officers. It's really rough. It's not a life that I wouldn't want on nobody.
You mentioned this before, and a lot of times people don't understand when you have a loved one in prison, they kind of do time
with you. Yes.
And so you've got these young sons.
Yeah, they grown men now.
Yeah. And there had to be a lot of concerns going on with you. My sons need me. I'm trying to raise them in a way that hopefully will help them to avoid some of the traps that I got in, so forth and so on. How did that go, and maybe what was the result of you not being able to be there for them?
Me not being there, I feel that I let my kids down, and unfortunately that opportunity was taken away from me to raise my boys. I would like to point out my oldest son, his name is Jonathan Cherry. He's the one that we took to Florida on his birthday. He was 9 years old. It was his 9th birthday. My 8th year in prison, he was 17. I'll never forget, my mother came to visit me, and she brought my youngest son. My youngest son is Darius, the one that I had with my wife, Valerie. He was conceived while he was in prison. She brought him up on a visit, and my son, Jonathan Cherry, was supposed to be coming with them. And I asked my mother where he was at, and she was crying on the visit. She told me that he was locked up. I thought maybe it was for drugs, because he used to hear how I was in the streets, and he wanted to live that life. And I used to always try to get at him, you can't be selling drugs. That's not the way. You see where it got me, even though I didn't do this murder, but at the same time, the life that I was living, that's why I'm in the position that I'm in now. My mother came and visited me, and she told me that he was in prison. So I thought, okay, he's in prison, he's gonna be all right. She told me he was locked up for a murder. So my son, he caught a murder, he killed somebody, he actually did it. He killed somebody at 17 years old. And that's when I knew the pain that my mother, that my wife, and all my family felt when I got locked up for the murder, because that was the day when I realized the pain that I put my mother through, because I love my kids, and I love my kids so much that I knew the pain that my mother felt when I got locked up for a murder, because I felt that same pain. And then from there, I have my other son, Jamel. He's 5 years old. When I went to prison, he went to prison also for shooting somebody. He did 5 years. He had a 5-year sentence. He did like 50 months in prison. My youngest son, Darius, he grew up without a father. He was born while I was in prison. We get conjugal visits in the prisons where I was at. And I have a son, he's actually 23 years old, and he's been in and out of prison. So it shows, me not being there for my kids, the effect that it have on them, because I believe that I would have seen the road that they was going down, and I maybe could have snatched them up before they went down that road, because I was living that way before.
You know, as you mentioned something, I mean, we see the effects of fatherlessness all over the
Yes.
world. And to see how this one incident, it not only affected your life, but somehow hopped out of prison and affected your boys' lives in similar ways.
Yes.
Have you ever thought that somehow this is going to turn around for my good? That somehow, how can I get and find the good out of everything that I'm going through? Was it something good that you were able to locate as a result of being in prison?
Oh, yes. I could tell you, like in 2012, a friend of mine's, me and him was real close, and I went to this one particular prison, and he told me he had turned his life around. He was into the church. He said, Jonathan, you know, come to church with me. I was never a religious person, and I was like, no, I'm not going to church. He's like, Jonathan, you need to really go to church with me. And, you know, I just felt some kind of way. I said, you know, I'm not going to church. He said, Jonathan, God could make things happen for you. And I was like, listen, why am I going through what I'm going through? Why would God have me suffering like this? That's the attitude that I had. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
And I went to church with my friend this one particular day. And the words, I guess, were so touching. And it was something in the words that the pastor said. And every Sunday from that day on, I went to church. 3 months later, every time service was over, they always say, everybody want to turn their life over to God. I would never get up because the lifestyle that I was living in prison, I felt, no, that ain't the way for me. People gonna look at me different. That's the way I felt at the time because of the type of, you know, reputation that I had in prison. And that day, I actually got up and I walked up to the front and I accepted God in my life. About 2 months later, I got baptized. And the investigation started going on with my case and things started happening. And, you know, and I always let people know, you know, I tell them right now today that, you know, I give God all the praise for me being here today because I know if not for him, I wouldn't be here. Because the life that I was living, I believe he put me in prison for a reason, to save me and for me to come out here and tell my story. And I don't want people to feel sorry for me. You know, a lot of people, when they hear my story, Jonathan, I feel so sorry what happened. But people don't know that. I know for a fact that God saved me.
Jonathan, I call that the grace of God.
Yes.
It's his unmerited, undeserved favor.
Yes.
And his love for us that even allows his mercy. The mercy of God is that the bad you deserve, you don't get.
Right.
And the grace of God is the good you don't deserve, you get. And God has been good to you, man.
Yes, he has.
You know, God has been good to you.
He has.
You know, what a story, and we're almost there, but things started happening. You've got people working on your case, but now you got God on your case now.
That's right.
You know, and
That's
he's
right.
a lawyer that's never lost a case.
That's right.
Don't get me preaching up here now, you know. He's a lawyer that's never lost a case. And so the times have gone by, and they're working on your case, and they go and visit the same woman who turned against you. Tell us what happened when they paid her a visit.
In 2013, they went to her around in May because they was investigating my case. And they told her we were investigating Jonathan Fleming's murder. She broke down crying. She said that she had no idea that I was still in prison. She said she regretted every day with what she did. And she gave them a recent up-to-date affidavit stating that what she said back then was a lie. And when I went down from there, what happened was I actually went down to court. I went down to court. They discovered the phone receipt that I paid my phone bill in Florida that was in my possession when I got arrested. There was a phone receipt that was in my possession when I got arrested.
25 years or so ago.
when I got arrested
When
back
you got
then,
arrested back then.
that receipt was in my pocket. And during trial back then, I told my lawyer that the detective took the receipt off of me. This detective took the stand at trial, and he denied ever taking the receipt off of me. He said he don't recall ever taking the receipt off of me. 24 and a half years later, that receipt pops up in a file. They called me down to court, and I sat down with the district attorney and them, but this is when the new district attorney came in office. They actually sat me down and they opened up a folder and they pushed over a piece of paper to me, and I said, "What's that?" I said, "That's a phone receipt that was in your folder." And then they also had a letter. The letter was a letter that when I told the police department in Brooklyn, New York, that I was in Florida, what they did, they had contact the police in Orlando, Florida, and they told the police in Orlando, Florida, we have a guy named Jonathan Fleming here in New York, Brooklyn, saying that he was in Florida from the 12th to the 16th. We want you to check into that. The detectives in Orlando, Florida, they investigated it, and it was confirmed. There was 2 people that placed me in that hotel, said they do remember seeing me. And the detectives in Orlando, Florida sent the letter back to the police in Brooklyn. They never turned that letter over neither. They withheld that letter. That letter was turned over to me too. That letter was turned over to me on it was in November 2013, and that receipt was turned over to me in 2013. At that time, I knew I was going home. I said, I'm out of here, I'm going home. At about 1:30, my counselor came to my cell. That was April 7, 2014, and she said, "Jonathan," she stuck her hand through my bars, through the cell, and she said, "Congratulations." She said, "You're going down to court tomorrow in front of a judge at 2 o'clock, and you're going to be released. Your case is being dismissed." That was the happiest moment in my life. I dropped to my knees. At that time, I dropped to my knees, and I thanked God.
You know, people could say, and this is something that I'm getting out of what you're telling us today. With all the evidence, with the alibi, with the letter, but when God stepped in, when nothing else was working,
Nothing.
He made sure that everything came together.
That's right.
Because God is the only one that can vindicate you out of a bad situation when people don't even understand just how bad that situation is. Jonathan, God can show up and say, "I'm going to make everything work the way it needs to work."
Right.
Everything work that needs to work. So in the middle of the wilderness, you found Jesus.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
And in fact, let me rearrange that. He found you.
He found me.
Because he wasn't lost, you know.
No,
Fascinating story. All right, so you know you're out now.
Yes, I am. All praise to God.
Yeah,
I'm out.
yeah, you're out now. How are you now? Now you're having to deal with a whole nother deal here. And I'm wanting our audience to hear about this. We need to do a part 2.
I have no problem.
Okay, if you don't have any problem with it, I don't have any problem with it,
All
because
right.
you know, you can't go through as much as you've gone through and experience what you experienced those years, and you know, you're out that day and everybody think, well, it's over. Well, no, I think there's some things that began right now.
Yes.
And we want to hear about that. And if you would stay with us for another show, and we would love to hear now the challenges and the things that you see, and now you got God on your side, and you return back to the streets, and which you saw some of the things and the regrets. And now I want to see what I can do to help you to resolve some of those regrets, especially when you're dealing with your sons are concerned, that I believe I have some things I can share with you that'll be a big blessing to you. I appreciate it. Amen. You know, Jonathan didn't deserve to be in jail. He didn't deserve to miss all that time with his family. You know, God understands what Jonathan went through, because God watched his one and only son, Jesus Christ, go through the very same thing, being falsely accused and unfairly punished for something he didn't do. Now, Jonathan didn't have a choice about the sacrifice he made, but Jesus did. And it's because Jesus loves you so much that he gave his very life so we can have a life that is overflowing with his goodness.
At some point in life, it will happen to you. One of the most emotionally and mentally frustrating things in life is being wrongly accused. The sense of powerlessness and anger can control you to the point of bad decisions, financial ruin, and relationship trouble. The desire for vengeance and vindication consume and torment you, bringing your world to the point of collapse. How long can you sustain this emotional prison before you get to the end of yourself? Days, weeks, years. How about 24 years, 7 months, and 20 days? That's the story you witnessed today with Creflo and Jonathan Fleming. Despite pictures, receipts, and witnesses that proved his innocence, Jonathan was charged and convicted of a murder he did not commit. Finally, after 24 years, Jonathan's turnaround came and he was released, making national headlines. But Jonathan found his freedom and his vindication not just through the law, but through the grace of God. Where are you today? What situation, false accusation, or painful memory has you stuck, unable to truly move forward in life until you let it go and receive God's grace? Maybe you know someone that is dying emotionally because they just can't get over what happened to them. Creflo has assembled a collection designed specifically to bring freedom from the prison of the anger, bitterness, and pain caused by false accusation. When you call today to support this program, you'll receive the easy-to-read guide called From Trouble to Triumph. Let Creflo walk you through the steps he's developed from years of counseling people just like you towards freedom from the grip of being wrongly accused. This collection also includes the presentation God is Good in Bad Times on DVD. Let Creflo help you discover the truth about God's character and goodness. You'll also get a copy of today's complete unedited interview as a free bonus. You'll hear insight and revelation about Jonathan Fleming's amazing story, not seen on the program. He and Creflo go one-on-one about the justice system, Jonathan's redemption, and things the average person doesn't know about life in prison. So that's From Trouble to Triumph, God is Good in Bad Times, and today's complete interview, all yours for your gift of just $20 or more to keep powerful stories like what you saw today on the air. Don't wait. Act while supplies last. Call or go online now.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you were as blessed as I have been by Jonathan's time with us today. Send us a message on yourworldwithcreflo.com or log on to our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages and share your story. Ask us questions and stay connected. And we'll be back next week for another special peek into your world. God bless you.
Thank you, partners and friends. Your love and financial support makes it possible to bring this message into billions of homes all across the globe.